the We Knew the Moon podcast, where we love all things empath, spiritual, witchy, unexplained, and spooky. Hosted by me, Dee Safier, co-founder of the Goddess Temple Twickenham, and joined by lots of special guests. Hi there, this is We Knew the Moon, and my name is Dee. This is where we like to talk about all things empath, spiritual, witchy, unexplained, and spooky. It's the official podcast of the Goddess Temple Twickenham. Check it out. And today I am joined by Sareta. Hi.
Hello, pretty lady.
Hello. So you were with us earlier in the season. Check out those episodes. They were fabulous, as is she. Sareta, you are a content creator, a blogger, a podcaster. You've got an amazing podcast called Women Who Rebrand. You've got amazing guests as well.
Yes.
I'm going to give you clues because, you know, my guests don't know what topic I'm going to cover. So I'm going to give you some clues. I know. Okay. And I want you to guess what I'm going to be talking about today.
Okay.
Clue number one. It's a place.
It's a place. Enfield.
Close. Number two. It came up a lot in the Voodoo episode in season 3.
New Orleans.
And I was going to give you another clue that we are going there together next year.
Yes.
I only have 3 clues because I figured if you didn't get it from that, I would just have to tell you. But luckily you did get it. So thanks to what is either like a dodgy timeshare scheme or an incredibly clever scam to get us murdered.
Please don't say that. Oh my gosh.
We're going to be staying in a notoriously touristy French Quarter, hopefully during Essence Festival next year, right?
Please.
I'm really excited because in preparation for both my trip on Monday to Romania and to Vlad the Impaler / Dracula's Castle, and also because I knew we were going to be recording this episode, I watched Interview with the Vampire last night.
Oh, it's one of my favorites, honestly.
So me and my partner, Paul, we're going on a bit of a 90s film rewatch sesh, right? Because there were so many perfect films made in that era. And Interview with the Vampire is that, isn't it? It's just a beautifully filmed, amazing acting. And it just, you know, if you're our kind of age, it was a real big influence in our teenage years, wasn't it?
Absolutely. So wait, Interview with a Vampire, that's the one.
Brad Pitt, Tom Cruise, Kirsten Dunst, very little Kirsten Dunst.
Yeah. Which ones? Is that the one with, what's that? For come into these arms again.
Are you thinking of Queen of the Dam?
No. And he's got that big hair. I feel like we should put the pin in this conversation and save it for our
Are you thinking about Dracula?
Yes,
with Gary Oldman, which is weird because I also watched that yesterday.
Okay, that's another favourite of mine. Honestly.
Is it? Because it was really awkward because I used to love it as well. And, you know, last night was Friday night. And so we were like, it's Friday night. Let's have movie night and be really cool. And I was getting more Sunday morning vibes from that film. So it was a little bit slow for us. And it was awkward because it was a film I really like. Hadn't seen since probably the 90s. And Paul had never seen it before. And I was like, you know, when you're like, oh shit, I've recommended this film and now I'm worried they're a bit bored by it. So you feel like you can't relax and enjoy the film because you're feeling self-conscious as the other person enjoying it. I don't know.
Yes. Well, do you know what? As I said, we should put a pin in this because the episode that I'm doing next with you, or is it going to come out before this?
No, next one. Yeah.
Right, so the next episode is all about, can I do a spoiler?
Yeah, fuck it.
Vampires. So let's put a pin in this conversation.
Yeah,
this is all good stuff.
But that was also part of the reason why, because I knew the topic you were going to be covering, Interview with a Vampire, a lot of it is set in New Orleans. So this was part of the reason I thought it was a really nice link between our 2 episodes.
Forgot about that.
Yeah, and I absolutely love New Orleans. I've been there a couple of times. When I was younger, I had a friend who lived in Baton Rouge and we'd regularly go for trips, but I haven't been there since, you know, I guess early 20s, late teens. So I've never been when I can legally drink a hurricane.
Oh.
Hurricane.
Very dangerous.
I just can't wait to go with you. I watched American Horror Story, The Coven, recently. It's the only American Horror Story I've seen because someone told me it was more witchy rather than sci-fi or ghosts or whatever. So I'd be less scared watching it on my own. Have you seen it?
Okay. Yeah, I'm a American Horror Story fanatic.
I figured
I've seen them all.
And I loved it, so I might go back and watch some of the other ones. I also picked this topic because I regularly think about the time we went to Glastonbury.
Oh, yeah.
And you had your reading.
Oh, yes.
With this guy who used to live in New Orleans. And he was British, but he clearly was just obsessed with New Orleans, everything voodoo. And he had a shrine to Marie Laveau, who was the Voodoo Queen of New Orleans. Mm-hmm. And when I said I heard of her from American Horror Story, The Coven, he got so annoyed, didn't he? He
was like angry. Like a cat with his back up.
And do you remember he was like, they didn't portray her correctly in that at all. And it's like, what, the documentary American Horror Story? Did they make shit up? Bless
him. No, he was like, they've bastardized the whole history of it. And it's like, it's just a program, dude. It's not that deep. But yeah.
And he was probably so used to these millennials coming in and being like, I know her from American Horror Story, and I know Kate Bush from Stranger Things,
Yeah.
So I get it. But it just made me laugh the way he was like, it wasn't factually accurate.
I mean, we can't make it factually accurate because it's entertainment, dear. But maybe it's like The Crown. I don't watch The Crown, but it's not going to be factually accurate because someone else has written it.
There's a bit of artistic license and people weren't there for the actual conversations, et cetera, et cetera. But the people mentioned, like Marie Laveau in American Horror Story, were real. They just, fictionalized it to make it a primetime show. But I thought because it's not factually accurate, I would go into a bit more detail about the people mentioned in American Horror Story, The Coven. So I'm going to tell you today about Voodoo Queen Marie Laveau, Madame LaLaurie, and the Axman of New Orleans. Okay. And then I'm going to round up with some creepy New Orleans facts.
Yeah.
Right. So Marie Laveau, start with her. So I started my research with her on the History of American Women website, where she's listed in the Scandalous Women section. So I already liked her. But then most of what I read about her didn't seem that scandalous. And I had to remind myself constantly, okay, but you have to think of the time and the context. Sort of 1600s, and also she was of mixed heritage. She had a lot of power and influence for someone who wasn't white in that time. So if you keep that in mind, then you can see how she was seen as much more scandalous at the time. So let me give some more context, basically. The first white settlers in Louisiana, which is in the southeast of the States, they were French, hence the name New Orleans, because Orleans is a place in France. It was 1682 that the French claimed the area as the Louisiana Territory, which was actually much bigger than modern day Louisiana. And it reached halfway up the states and left and right, and maybe some of Mexico, I don't even know. And it was quite common for second-born sons, because they were a bit more dispensable, every family, every rich family, every noble family needed to have the firstborn son to carry on the lineage and be the heir to the title or the estate or whatever. The second-born sons were seen as like a bit of a luxury. You've got like a backup heir. So they were also a little bit more dispensable. So quite often they were sent into the church to become priests, because that was always seen as a good thing to have a priest in the family. It kind of covered everyone religiously. Or they were sent to the New World to seek their fortune because they weren't going to inherit it. So they had to kind of make their own fortune. It wasn't the norm for the estate to be divided equally between the offspring. You might get like a pocket money or something. But yeah, they were kind of left to their own devices. And obviously, if you have money already, it's a bit easier to make more money. So they were a better place to make their fortune. The French that went over there were originally called the Creoles. And then that term started to be used for people of color from New Orleans. It's its own unique culture with cuisine and all sorts of stuff. So There were some doubts about the date of birth of Marie Laveau, but the consensus is around 1794 or 1801. So it was a few years out. She was born in Louisiana and she was Creole. So that means at the time that she was a mix between white colonizers, black slaves, and free people of color from southern Louisiana. There was lots of Caribbean flavor chucked in there too for good measure. You know, at this point, Louisiana was like a mixing ground for all of these different cultures, which is what makes it so special today. She was the illegitimate daughter of a wealthy Creole plantation owner called Charles Laveau. And his mistress, Marguerite, isn't that a great name? Marguerite. You may be wondering about her taking the name of her father, even though he was a wealthy white guy and she was an illegitimate child of someone who was possibly a slave or definitely not white. Quite often slaves or even free black people, but basically working as slaves on these plantations, often took the surname of their master/employer, which to me just feels icky, doesn't it? Like, imagine being owned as a slave and then you barely know your name or anything because you've been abducted or you've lost that link to your family background and your culture and your country. So you just adopt the surname of the person who's enslaving you. It just feels like a double kick in the teeth.
Yeah.
So it wasn't weird, basically, that she was allowed to adopt her father's name, because it doesn't necessarily say that it's her dad. It just means she's from that estate. Marie grew up a devout Catholic, going to mass every day. She was also educated and trained to be a hairdresser. So that bit was right in American Horror Story. But in 1819, she married a carpenter called Jacques Paris, who was a free person of color from Haiti. Apparently, you can still see the marriage certificate to this day in the St. Louis Cathedral in New Orleans. So we should add that to the list of things to do, because that cathedral is like super grand, really impressive. And I believe it's quite central anyway. So we'll probably pass it. We might as well pop in, huh? And I think it's on this document that for some reason they described her appearance as tall, beautiful, and statuesque with curly black hair, golden skin, and good features, meaning more white than black.
Yeah, like more European.
Yeah, which is just really weird if that's put on her marriage certificate. Like,
oh, that's actually on her marriage certificate. Oh, yeah, that's weird.
Marie Laveau, she was clearly mixed, but she was deemed on the better side of mixed because she had more white features.
Yeah.
The massive eye rolls for those of you that don't have Patreon. But by the way, if you want to see the eye rolls, you could sign up to our Patreon, patreon.com/We Knew the Moon.
The eye rolls are definitely worth it.
So Jacques Paris, her husband, came to New Orleans amongst a huge amount of immigrants from Haiti because there was a massive revolution there in 1804. So I'm not going to get into the reasons why the revolution happened too much because it was a lot. But there resulted in a huge amount of white people, slaves, and free people of color going to Louisiana because it was also French-speaking like Haiti. So it was like an easier transition than going somewhere else, because obviously a lot of the area was Spanish-speaking or English-speaking. So Louisiana was still predominantly French-speaking. Due to the large influx of people with African ancestry, there was a revival of voodoo practices in New Orleans. This voodoo was very specific to New Orleans. And just like in witchcraft, you could have dark practices as well as light practices. So voodoo is not predominantly evil or bad or anything like that. It's like witchcraft where you have good in quotation marks and bad. So much of it was light, like love spells, banishing negativity. But then there was the darker side, which became known in New Orleans as hoodoo. Which I can't say without going, who do you do? Remind me of the Babe. Classic film. That was my, as much as I can afford to sing of the Labyrinth. I don't think it's 90s. I think it's 80s, but I'm definitely in the bracket of perfect films. I'm just Googling.
It's definitely 80s.
Oh. 86. Such a good film. So hoodoo, very specifically to New Orleans and more focusing on the darker side. But this was obviously sensationalized, and because it's linked to the people of color and the slaves, it was seen as something evil, dark, etc., etc. But only a couple of years after they got married, Jacques went missing, and Marie started calling herself the Widow Paris. So even though he's missing, she's calling herself a widow, implying he's dead. So I don't know whether at just some point you just accept that you're pretty much a widow.
But did she have something to do with it?
Yes, there's also that theory. His body was never found, and it is thought that he probably just left her, which, if true, was a dick move because she also already had 2 kids by him.
So he ghosted her.
Basically. Luckily, it turns out she was a pretty fabulous hairdresser, so she started doing hair for the rich, white, and Creole people.
Oh, wow.
Because obviously she's now got to make her own living in a place where there were very few opportunities for women. These women at the hair salon love to gossip. And so Marie started hearing all these different scandals and secrets of this kind of upper class in New Orleans.
Which you would do as a hairdresser anyway.
Like you used to do makeup. Was it similar? Did you get a lot of...
Do you know what? No, because if you're in someone's face, they're a bit quiet. It's like very close up. Yeah.
And also,
but hair, you're behind, aren't you? So when I did hair, that's when people would chat.
And I suppose when you're doing makeup, it's either for an event, like a wedding, so they're talking about that, or for work, and then you're at work.
Yeah. So the most information I would find out is weddings, because there's all of other people in the room and people talking around you. So you're like...
Did you ever do makeup at a wedding and think, man, this couple is not going to last? Don't say mine.
Yes.
Did
I don't
you say
give too much away. No, because I actually thought it came across like a marriage of convenience. And I don't want to say too much just in case like 15, 20 years later they're following me. But no, they did actually get divorced.
Well, I don't think we've got anyone from immigration listening. Marie eventually found another partner, probably because of her good features. Louis Christophe Dumesnil de Glampion. And they lived together until his death in 1855. They never got married, but there's about 15 children attributed to them. Now, it's not clear
15?
Whether... Yeah, but it's not clear whether all of them were theirs or whether some of them were their grandkids as well. I mean, still a lot of children in one household. But it's thought that 7 of the kids were theirs, on top of the 2 others she already had from previous relationship. Ooh. And then the rest were grandkids. Sadly, only 2 of their kids survived. Most of them succumbed to yellow fever, which was an epidemic at the time. Both survivors were named Marie because that was very common custom to name your daughters after the mom as well as the sons after the father.
But more than one.
Yeah, that's weird. But you would normally have like a different middle name. So you'd be like Marie Francoise and Marie Claire and Marie Louise, you know?
Okay.
Either way, she had to quit hairdressing because of all of these children. And this is when she just decided to become the Voodoo Queen instead. I guess the hours were better or more convenient for childcare.
That's so random.
Yeah. So she was still a devout Catholic. And again, check out the Voodoo episode to hear about how that's possible because they weren't mutually exclusive. And still to this day, it's not mutually exclusive. You could be Catholic, you could be a devout Catholic and still practice voodoo traditions or African traditions or witchcraft and so forth. Although it has always been viewed by some as being a bit spooky or sinister. And later on, voodoo was banned by certain churches, specific churches. But her mix of Catholicism and voodoo made it much more accessible to the rich, i.e. white folk of New Orleans. She started taking charge of public voodoo rituals in Congo Square, where we're also going to go, and holding ceremonies around the town. So Congo Square, by the way, was one of the few public places where white people and people of color were allowed to socialize together. Because again, you've got to remember how segregated society was then. It wasn't the country of America yet, but like this is in an area where they only ruled out segregation in the 1960s. So this is like intense segregation. So the fact that as a hairdresser, she had access to like intimate chats with these white women of a different class and so forth, it was really rare. So there's only a couple of places in the entire city of this multicultural city where white people and people of color are allowed to socialize together. That's crazy, isn't it? Marie would get everyone there together on a Sunday to dance and sing. Oh, I forgot I have maps. Oh, let me open them up.
Maps?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm so excited about this. I forgot.
I can tell.
Look how close. This is our hotel.
French Quarter.
And then there's Congo Square.
Oh, wow. So literally a 14-minute walk.
Yeah. And Google Maps is always like, I walk faster than Google Maps predicts, but you walk slower. So let's keep it at 14. But, that's a really nice walk. We could go down Bourbon Street. Marie Laveau sold gris-gris, which are amulets that protect the wearer. She also sold charms, powders. She told fortunes, and she performed exorcisms. She held her ceremonies, though, on Lake Pontchartrain. These ceremonies would include singing, dancing, and spirit possession. Now, Marie had rivals and she had disbelievers, as you can imagine, haters, basically. Skeptical people felt her divination was largely influenced by all the gossip she heard as a hairdresser and by bribing people's servants for information. So they thought she was just BSing. Do you remember Sally Morgan, the psychic? She got one for wearing an earpiece at one time and it accidentally projected over the speakers or something. And she was being fed information about the people there. Yeah.
I didn't know that happened.
And I'm sure that happens even more because I remember that was early days of social media or before we even had social media. But I mean, you know how easy it is to find out so much about a single person if you know their name and if their Facebook or their Instagram is open.
Yeah, this is why I'm skeptical of those kind of event things when you go in a crowd, because you buy a ticket, therefore your name's on it, you just Google.
So they're basically saying she did the 1700s or whatever version of that. Rosalie, which I think is such a pretty name, who was another Creole woman, tried to take over as Voodoo Queen. She put a giant wooden life-size doll in her yard to inspire fear and awe, and it was working. People were getting intimidated by her because of this giant life-size doll, which I presume they thought was some kind of voodoo doll or whatever.
Life-size doll of who? Her?
I don't know. I couldn't find out. But basically, to get her back, Marie stole it. Rosalie took her to court, but Marie managed to have the doll permanently removed because by now Marie has a lot of influence. So she knows how to work the system. So whether it is from hearing gossip at the hairdresser or bribing servants or her genuine ability to tell fortunes or whatever, she's got a lot of people in her pocket at this time. Through her life, she also treated the poor and the sick as she had been trained in nursing. And again, devout Catholic, and that is in theory, but not often in practice, what you do as a Christian, help others less fortunate than you. And she was one that actually did this. So she basically soon becomes the number one voodoo queen in the whole of New Orleans. And in 1875, though, she retires and dies in 1881 in her sleep at approximately age 86, maybe older, maybe younger. Remember, we didn't know what year she was born.
True.
She's buried in St. Louis Cemetery 1, and it's one of the most visited grave sites in New Orleans. Apparently, her grave received more visitors than the grave of Elvis.
Wow.
Right? So now I'm showing you, this is our hotel.
Are we going to go see where she was buried?
Yeah, because the cemetery is a gorgeous cemetery, with loads of tombs and everything. So if you're up for it.
Wow. Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
Marie had a fun habit of calling all her daughters Marie also. She also, her daughter looked very similar and took on the role of Voodoo Queen when her mom passed away. And a lot of the stories attributed to Marie Laveau could possibly be stories actually about her daughter. Apparently she wasn't as good as her mom, though. She lacked a lot of her compassion, and she ended up running a bar and brothel on Bourbon Street.
Fun.
She was in charge of the Maison Blanche, where voodoo ceremonies usually took place, and there are now reports of lavish parties with naked dancing girls. Actually, her daughter died in the 1890s, so maybe 10, 15 years after her mom, so not that long. And then they both passed into obscurity for a little while. These days, though, there's a movement to have the original Marie Laveau canonized, i.e. made into an official saint. Now, here's a weird fact about her, though. She had at least 7 slaves in her lifetime, which I know it was a societal thing as well. Like, it showed your status, but it just find it hard to imagine people of color owning slaves. But
yeah, well, it happened.
I know. It just...
Especially, I think, with, like you said, Creole, it's like a hierarchy thing, isn't it?
For sure. So I think that having slaves as a person of color put you up the ranks a little bit. But obviously don't agree with anyone having slaves.
No.
But yeah, it's just...
Speaking of which, I know we're going on a tangent here, but we were talking about creepy houses a few episodes back. I think J-Lo did it recently. I can't remember. But, you know, those massive plantation houses in America, people using them as wedding venues.
Yeah.
And the houses do obviously look beautiful, but with all that history there, would you not find it a bit weird?
I wouldn't really pick one.
This tarnishing my wedding day. I'm just going to sit here whilst loads of energy from a lot of pain and suffering and injustices were just around here. But I'm going to have my happy day here because the house is pretty.
I know. Yeah, for sure. And I found that a lot in New Orleans. And, you know, those plantation houses, they are fucking gorgeous, but they are entirely built off the back of slavery and maintained on the back of slavery. And obviously they're not being used as such now. But yeah, would I pick it for my wedding venue? I'd probably go visit because I'd want to learn about that kind of background. But I wouldn't want my like happy day there. I don't know. But I found that so much when I was going around New Orleans, because you're looking at all this gorgeous stuff and realizing that it has such a dark background. Like the French Quarter is obviously one of the very well-to-do areas, or was at the time. And you can see these amazing, gorgeous houses like the one in American History Horror Story. I keep on calling it History Story because I keep on thinking the guy that's like, it's not a documentary. But yeah, you know that, again, those houses were built for people who had slaves and maintained by slaves. And it's a really weird energy. Let me tell you another weird fact. Oh my God, this is a total coincidence, but I'm wearing a Misfits dress. So the Misfits are one of my favorite bands. And in 1982, before I was born, the Misfits had, I don't know if you know the Misfits, but they always dressed up as skeleton face paint, and they were all like in leather bondage gear and all kinds of stuff. They had a concert in New Orleans, and afterwards they went to the cemetery where Marie Laveau was buried, and apparently tried to exhume her. But according to UPI News, 18 people, including band members, were arrested. But there's a lot of controversy around this. One person filed a complaint of assault by the police, and some reports say they hadn't even entered the cemetery when they were arrested. And I found it interesting. I don't think we'll ever know fully what happened there, but it was in the 80s, which was right at the height of Satanic Panic. Remember Satanic Panic? No. We didn't have it as bad here, but in the States, 80s, 90s, lots of cult activity, but also people being terrified of rock music and Satanists and everything that happens, every murder or abduction or horrible thing that happened to a kid. People were like, it must be Satanists. The bassist, Jerry Only, said they hadn't even gotten out of the car before they hear, hey, Dracula, get your hands up on the wall.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Again, we don't know what they would have done if they'd got into the cemetery. The Misfits had to return to New Orleans a month later, where the judge told them off for being naughty and told them to stay away from New Orleans and fine them a few $100s. So they got a slap on the wrist, but they also weren't allowed to go back to New Orleans, which is a bit harsh and cruel.
Ever? Like banned from the whole place?
Yeah. So since 2015, you can no longer just access the cemetery. You have to go with an official tour guide. So we're going to have to book it. This is sad because it's as a result of continued vandalism.
Why do humans gotta be so humany? Just leave shit alone so we can enjoy it.
And a cemetery, like, leave those fucking people. I mean, I know one of the worst cases that I saw of this was when I went to Père Lachaise in Paris. It's a cemetery where you've got Oscar Wilde and Jimi Hendrix. And like, not only do people deface those tombs, you know, people writing their messages on the tombs and all that kind of stupid shit. Leave something. If you want to make your mark, leave some flowers or a little knickknack.
Exactly. But to like deface shit.
I know. But what's terrible is they also deface the tombs nearby or on the way. And it's like, fuck's sake, right? It's just, what is wrong with you? Whatever your spiritual belief, don't mess with dead people's shit. Do you know what I mean? Have a bit of respect.
Surely they're going to get some kind of, I don't know, witchy woo-woo karma.
I hope they do. Anyway, so that's the story of Marie Laveau. So like I said, I didn't really hear in that story anything super scandalous, but I think it was the fact that she managed to rise to prominence as a Creole woman and off her own back. Okay, she had like a wealthy I was going to say master. I don't mean master. I meant the male equivalent of mistress. She was the mistress. And so he was why is there such a shit name for the girl? The guy's just the guy. So she was the mistress of a wealthy, white, French person for a long time, but her reputation is off her own back, which I think is quite impressive at the time. So let's move on to Madame LaLaurie, also featured in American Horror Story, The Coven, and played by the legend that is Kathy Bates.
I love Kathy Bates, and her character in it is so good. And I don't want to spoil it for people that don't watch it, but the karma she got was amazing. So
fucking hilarious. Yeah,
so good.
Obviously, I recommend watching American Horror Story, The Coven. If you think scary shit isn't for you, I wouldn't say The Coven was scary in the same way. It's not I don't know. It's quite gory. But do check it out, because Kathy Bates, fucking legend. She plays this role so well. It's such a despicable character in real life and in the show. I mean, she's sickening, and not in a drag queen kind of sickening way. I mean, in a nauseating way. She is so good.
The way you're fangirling Kathy Bates. Oh, what's her name? Because I'm I love this actress. And she played Marie Laveau. What's her name? The black lady. I'm going to have to Google.
Oh, Angela
Bassett? She is just amazing. Got to that age. And I looked like I had her skin had please.
She looked so fucking awesome the whole way through. She played it so well. But I got to give
so powerful
to Kathy Bates, because who would even want to touch this character? So brave to even pick this character and to be able to play it so well. And I've seen interviews with Kathy Bates. She's nothing like this person. So she is a phenomenal actress. So I imagine the documentary American Horror Story got a lot wrong about Madame LaLaurie. So I'm going to try to set the record straight a little bit. Marie Delphine was born in 1787, and her third marriage was to Mr. LaLaurie. So she became known as Madame LaLaurie. She was born in Spanish Louisiana. So again, you had lots of Spanish people there. And she was one of 5 children, quite normal to have big families at the time. The family was prominent on both her mum and her dad's side. Her uncle by marriage was the governor of the Spanish American provinces, which was a big deal. And her cousin was mayor of New Orleans for a time. I mentioned the Haitian Revolution before, which caused Marie Laveau's future husband to migrate from Haiti to Louisiana. So they were white, if it wasn't clear. And so a lot of white people fled Haiti as well because it was a slave revolution. And so he came to Louisiana. The slaves were revolting against their owners in Haiti. And the impact this had in other slave-owning areas like New Orleans was to increase the defensiveness and also the insecurity of slave owners. So you have all these plantations and all these businesses based on the work of slaves, seeing neighboring countries and areas having these slave revolutions. So obviously people are going to start getting nervous. Mm-hmm. So they still think that they're right to own these slaves, but they're worried because there are some areas where the slaves are revolting and some people are getting killed as well as losing their livelihoods, their homes, everything. As a result, in New Orleans, the treatment of slaves declined even further as slave owners tried to instill more fear and less chance of a revolution where they were. So instead of being like, let's treat them better so that they like us more and don't revolt against us, they're like, no, let's fucking crush their soul, their spirit, their body.
Do you know what? That is humanity. Narcissistic people, they don't think. It's like, let me stop being mean. Let me actually start being nice. And then maybe we'll get along. And it's like, no, but it's like, we're going to keep on. Even
logically, if you take out compassion and all the moral reasons why this is fucking evil, it's just ridiculous because that's the kind of treatment that the slaves were rebelling against. So they're rebelling against this kind of treatment. So they're going to do this treatment more. It's cuckoo bananas to me. But anyways, Madame LaLaurie got married twice before, as I mentioned, and she was widowed both times. The first time she was widowed, she was already pregnant. So she has one daughter called Marie Borgia or Borquita. She had 4 kids by her second husband, all daughters, named some combination of Marie and Louise. So she had Marie-Louise Pauline, Louise Marie Laure, Marie-Louise Jean, Jean-Pierre Paulin. So then she marries her third husband, who was physician Leonard Louis Nicolas LaLaurie. And this is the guy that had come from Haiti. And he was her toy boy. So in 1831, 6 years after they got married, she bought a mansion now known as the LaLaurie Mansion on 1140 Royal Street. Presumably, she was able to buy this place in her own right because of her previous marriages. So as a widow, she would have inherited everything from her previous husbands. And I presume that they were wealthy because she came from a very wealthy, prominent background. So she would have married people of similar stature. Mm-hmm. So she was very, very rich. She extended the house and she added slave quarters. But in the following year, Madame LaLaurie petitioned for a separation from her husband, claiming his treatment was unsupportable. However, it doesn't seem like their separation lasted long because they continued to live together soon after. So why are we even talking about this lady? She seems like your bog standard high society white woman in New Orleans at the time, right? Mm-hmm. Well, it's because something happened in 1834 that shocked everyone. A lot of the following is from a history.com article. I can't tell you the title of it because it will give away the story. But I'll put a link in the show notes. On the 10th of April, 1834, there was a fire at the LaLaurie Mansion. And what this uncovered was a torture chamber where slaves were brutalized by Madame LaLaurie. You remember the awful scenes from American Horror Story? Sadly, that is one of the things that was not fictionalized. It was actually fucking real. So fires, super common in the time. There weren't fire alarms and there were a lot of fires because people are using open fires to heat houses and to cook and whatnot. So firefighters attend this house and they rescued a 70-year-old black lady from the kitchen where she was chained up. LaLaurie was busy trying to save her furniture at the time. It turns out that this lady in the kitchen was the one who started the fire, and it was an attempt to either escape or, failing that, just die. Imagine being fucking 70-year-old and being chained. I don't think that, sadly, I don't think that chaining the slaves during their work was uncommon. So I don't know whether that was particularly shocking to those that found out, but the rest was. Authorities also found 7 slaves in the attic tied up with spiked collars. And by spiked collars, I mean the spikes going inwards.
On the inside.
I don't mean the kind of spiked collars that we used to wear as goth teenagers. Until this time, Madame LaLaurie was known to treat her slaves badly. So imagine how bad you have to treat slaves to be known as someone who treats slaves badly.
Yeah.
In the previous year, previous to the fire, Madame LaLaurie was chasing a small slave girl with a whip, and this girl fell off the roof and died. Madame LaLaurie hid the body in the well, but the police found it. She was fined at the time, and they forced her to sell all her other slaves. So again, this wasn't something I knew that happened. So apparently you could be banned from owning slaves if you were found to be mistreating them.
Okay, well, that's kind of good. But,
I mean, I suppose, but it's also like you're just putting a plaster on it. You should just be banning slavery almost.
Yeah.
But I just thought it was interesting that there were some checks and balances, I guess. But, you know, how rich people always manage to work the system to their advantage. She just arranged for her friends and family to buy slaves for her and sneak them into the mansion. So she'd be like, oh, no, it's not my slave. It's my sister's slave. You know, she had 100 daughters. Well, she had like however many kids. She'd just like, oh, it's my daughter's slave. Of course she lives in my house, you know? But I mean, it must have been pretty easy to follow up, you know? Like they knew her, but I mean,
but they don't really care though, do they? I don't think they really cared.
No, of course not. They're just like following due diligence and doing their bit. If a death is, you know, a death of a child is public, then they have to be publicly seen to be doing something. But then they don't care any further than that, do they? Looking at official documents, there are 12 deaths of slaves at the mansion between 1830 and 1834. So 12 slaves died in 4 years. This could be because of things like yellow fever. Like I said before, was an epidemic at the time, but the cause of death is not listed. But to put this in perspective, in case you're thinking that this is like 12 out of hundreds of slaves or something, when she was forced to give up her slaves, she had 9. So it's not like, imagine a plantation with fields where you have hundreds of slaves and 12 died in 4 years because of the treatment and the working conditions and typhoid and yellow fever, whatever. This was a house where she had on average 9 slaves at a time. So that's a high fucking
turnover, yeah.
Right? And also, this is a city home. And it was, if you were a slave in a house, as opposed to in the fields, it was seen as a, I don't want to say cushy job for a slave, but it was less physically taxing. I'm guessing that makes it even more unlikely that this many would be dying. When the fire happened, it revealed the true horrors. And so a mob formed outside her house. Her and her husband escaped by boat to Paris. They left behind their butler, who was also involved in the torture, because they were clearly like, fuck you, we're outie. The house was badly damaged by the mob and the fire. But one of the things that got me was that the slaves were then taken to the local jail.
Why?
Like, fucking take them to the hospital. What? Probably because they just didn't know what to do with them. But at the local jail, they were then available for public viewing. And up to 4,000 people went to go see them to convince themselves of how bad the torture and treatment was. Fucking hell, these people have been through enough.
Just literally let them go. Just let them go.
And, I imagine these slaves had absolutely no say whether they were paraded around or not. It's not like they're like, yes, I want people to see what I've gone through.
Yeah. 2
of the slaves were so badly brutalized that they died after their rescue. Probably because they were in a fucking jail as well. Like it's almost like their situation didn't improve that much more when they got rescued. Quotation mark. Madame LaLaurie never faced charges because she ran off to Paris. But supposedly her reputation was destroyed. Poor her. She died in Paris in 1842. So less than 10 years after she ran away. So I'm going to show you now. I made so many maps. I love a good
I don't really want to go see her.
No.
Well, she's in Paris anyway, so that's something.
She's dead. You can see here.
Wow, that's just hotel. So close.
Right? And that's where...
And this is all really close to the Mississippi River.
Yeah.
There must be some cool things along the Mississippi River.
There's some gorgeous, casino boats and stuff like that. So, yeah.
We're going to have to go for, 2 weeks or a month.
Just move there. I imagine we will be walking past this house, even if we didn't actively go.
Yeah.
Because you saw how close everything is. However, it's not the same mansion. After the fire, the house lay in ruins for 4 years. It was then rebuilt by the next owner. Okay, so do you want to hear some weird LaLaurie facts?
There's more.
In 2007, Nicolas Cage bought the house.
Oh.
I don't think I could. I know that.
But it's not the original house, so maybe you want to sprinkle some good on it.
And also, I can't imagine you could buy a property in New Orleans that's not on the site of something fucking awful happening, to be honest.
Yeah, that's true. That's also true. But in America or anywhere, to be honest.
So he seems to have lost it and his other New Orleans house in foreclosure 2 years later. So I don't know if Nicholas is having some money problems or what. This house is still private property and no tours or similar are available. In fact, the house used in American Horror Story wasn't even the exterior of the mansion, as the owners refused filming permission.
Yeah, I thought they would have just made a set. I didn't think they actually used someone's house.
In American Horror Story, Madame LaLaurie and Marie Laveau were kind of frenemies, weren't they? Don't want to do any spoilers, but 1 minute they're working together, the next minute they're working each other, blah, blah, blah. Their lives did intersect, but did they ever meet? Marie Laveau was about 13 years younger. They lived blocks from each other and at similar times. And for sure, they heard of each other.
They would have crossed paths.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Because they were, it was a very small community, especially amongst the prominent members of that society. So I am sure the paths crossed. I can't imagine because Madame LaLaurie had such a disdain and disrespect for people of color that she was a fan of Marie Laveau and vice versa, because I'm sure Marie Laveau would have heard about the fire and what came out of the fire. So, so definitely they would have known each other. And I imagine they would have avoided each other. Finally, I'm going to tell you the story of the Axman of New Orleans. Partly because he also appears in American Horror Story, and partly because it is creepy as fuck. Do you remember him in American Horror Story, The Coven? It's the older guy that Jessica Lange is in a relationship with.
Yeah. And he had a hat.
His name is Danny Salas Houston. I like this story because you know how I love my true crime. And he was a serial killer operating in New Orleans between 1918 and 1919. So much more recently. He may actually have started killing as early as 1911, but he killed at least 6 people and injured 6 more.
With an axe?
Surprise, surprise, he killed his victims using an axe. Hence the Axman.
Just making sure.
Yes. Often he used the victim's own axes. He would remove the back door with a chisel and he would leave the chisel behind, which is kind of weird because, like, you would have thought he'd take them with, you know. And then he would attack the residents with a razor or an axe. He would never steal anything from the victims' homes.
So it's just the thrill about killing people.
Yeah. I also found it weird that he would use people's own axes. I know at the time, we're talking 100 years ago, much more common for people to have an axe in their home.
I guess.
You know? They actually had to get
fireplaces,
firewood and do other stuff. But I feel like if you were intending on killing someone with an axe, you wouldn't leave it to chance that they have an axe there. You'd kind of just bring your own.
Well, be prepared, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's me. That's the Aries in me. It's like, well, what if they don't have an axe? But most of his victims were Italian or Italian-American. So there was a suspicion that it was racially motivated, someone that was anti-Italian for some reason. He killed men and women, and it was debated which was his intended target. Because there were couples that had been targeted. So was it the male that was his initial target and the woman was byproduct, you know, or the other way around?
Right.
One really random theory is that he committed the murders to promote jazz music. Think about that for a moment.
I'm thinking of jazz and music that I listen to. And a lot of music I listen to have lyrics. You know, we grew up with Eminem back in the day saying he's going to kill his mom and his baby mom and all of that. So I guess that's promoting murder. However, jazz is very... You know, when you act out music and it has a meaning behind it, is that what he's trying to say? Like, that's like him murdering someone or what?
No, it's weirder than that. A letter attributed to him said he would kill at 15 minutes past midnight on the night of the 19th of March, 1919, but he would spare any homes playing jazz music.
Oh, so you have to play jazz music or I'm going to kill ya. Okay.
Everyone played jazz, dance halls filled up, and no one was murdered that night.
Okay.
If you don't mind, I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to ask you to read the letter that the Axman had published, I think in local papers. I want you to include how he addresses the reader and how he's dated, including where he's dated it and where he's claims he's writing it from, etc. Okay? I'm going to share my screen.
Okay.
So if you
Am I going to channel someone else now?
If you could channel the Axman and read me this letter.
Oh, don't say that, Dee. I need my crystals around me, some kind of protection.
Okay, don't channel him too much. I seem to have cut off. He dated it the 13th of March. So you remember it was the 19th of March that he claimed he was going to kill people. And he said he was writing from hell. So
you're making me channel someone. All right. Okay. I'm going to get into character. Esteemed mortal, they have never caught me and they never will. They have never seen me, for I am invisible. I'm not a human being, but a spirit and a demon from the hottest hell. I am what you Orleanians and your foolish police call that man. Din, din, din. When I see fit, I shall come and claim other victims. I am alone, known whom they shall be. I shall leave no clues except my bloody axe, be smeared with blood and brains of whom I have sent below to keep me company. Now, to be exact, at 12:15 earthly time, on next Tuesday night, I am going to pass over New Orleans. In my infinite mercy, I am going to make a little proposition to you people. Here it is. I am very fond of jazz music, and I swear by all the devils that every person shall be spared in whose home a jazz band is in full swing at the time I have just mentioned. The Axman.
Isn't that creepy and weird? So obviously there's some debate about whether that actually came from the Axman or whether it was just like some weird publicity stunt in bad taste. Who knows? I am a big fan of My Favorite Murder. They covered the story of the Axman on their 60th episode entitled Jazz It! Now, the Axman was never caught, and he just mysteriously stopped killing, which either means he died, he went to prison for something else. Sometimes it's when they actually have a change of their personal situation, like they get married or something, which it's not.
He got a life.
Yeah, he got a life. But usually it's more boring than that. It's like, oh, I'm married, so I can't actually go out killing as easily because that wench at home is like, where are you going? But yeah, so he just stopped killing mysteriously, but never got caught. Kind of creepy. Those are the three characters, some of the main characters in that season, all based on these real life people. Creepy facts about New Orleans is how I'm going to round up this episode. Okay, so the cemeteries. I was looking at a lot of cemetery pictures because I was looking at Marie Laveau and stuff. And they're gorgeous cemeteries with the tombs, above ground tombs. And I found out apparently this is partly because dead bodies are not allowed to be buried underground in New Orleans.
Why?
It's because it's
of
swampy.
Yes. They would just rise back up like zombies. That'd be really petrifying.
That would be scary. Yeah. Yeah. So instead they have these above ground tombs, and then therefore they're decorated in these really fancy ways. Another creepy fact, jazz music is played at funerals to celebrate the person's life. Now, I am actually of the belief that very few people actually like jazz.
I like jazz.
Do you ever? I'm not saying when you go out, you listen to jazz music, it's not fun. But do you ever sit at home and be like, I'm going to put on some smooth jazz?
Okay, admittedly not, because I don't really know anything about jazz. But with my other half, we have actually gone to a jazz bar in France. And it was lovely.
Yeah. Oh, wait, in Paris?
Yes, actually.
Like a theater, and then they give you dinner while you watch this jazz?
Possibly. It's very small. We've probably gone to the same place. Let's go back. It was cute. But no, I don't
mind going out and listening to jazz. And I used to play saxophone, but I just have yet to meet someone who's like, oh, I fucking love jazz. It's what I listen to. And I get in their car and they turn on the stereo and there's jazz music.
Because you can't sing along. You don't know where it's going to go. It's a bit like,
if you've got it on CD, you can. You listen to it enough times.
Yeah, you'd have to learn it. Yeah, it's true.
So, but we're definitely going to go and listen to some jazz in New Orleans. Ops, right?
Yeah, ward off the Axman.
So I'm going to share my screen because I've got a couple of cool things to show you. These are creepy places. So we've got the Voodoo Museum, which was that the one that you're
definitely going to go to? Yes, I saw that.
Voodoo Museum. Again, I like to show you how close everything is to our hotel.
Minutes.
See?
We're going to get our steps on all together.
And then
collectively.
There's also the Museum of Death, which I think would be quite fascinating.
Yes, it
4
will.
minutes.
4 minutes. The closest one, obviously.
Right. And then look what I did. Look what I did.
What's
a 26-minute walk that takes in all of the places I showed you on the maps.
You are spectacular at organizing things. And this is why I'm looking forward to going away with you. I do this to a certain extent, but you have you're good. You're good. So what you need to do now is save this list and put timings of how long we're going to be at each one, and a little lunch break, a little drink break, etc. Yeah. But what are we going to do? Are we going to go to the furthest and work our way back, or the other way around?
No, well, you know what I need to do? I need to look at opening times.
That's true. If anyone wants to sponsor this trip, we're totally down for it.
We're going to need some cashola for this. So, yeah.
New Orleans Tourist Board, channeling you. Come on, let's do it. Let's do it. I'll make the most amount of content. It'd be brilliant.
Yeah.
It's done.
So that's my New Orleans episode.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed that. Fun. I feel like I learned a lot, but so much more to learn by going there.
I know. I can't wait. I can't wait to see the places that we've been talking about.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed that. Now, I have a friend. I don't know if you ever met her. Gillian Legacy. Friend that I knew through Danny. She dated someone in the band, but not anymore.
Oh, wait. I think I saw her pee once. Possibly. I accidentally went into the toilet and she was peeing. Yeah.
Okay. Well, her dad is a famous chef in America, and he has a restaurant in New Orleans. So we're going to have to go there. Emerald's restaurant. For sure. Yeah, we're going to go there. We're going to go there. But yeah, everyone else, give us some recommendations, because it's always fun when people give us recommendations. I think I'm going to put that in my stories as well.
Yeah. All right. Well, listeners, Sareta's going to be joining us again next week. We already told you her episode will be on vampires.
I hope you're looking forward to it. I'll see you then.
I'm so looking forward to it. See you next week.
Mwah.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
We Know the Moon is the official podcast for the Goddess Temple Twickenham. Don't forget, you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Pinterest. You can also visit our website, weknowthemoon.co.uk, for all of our upcoming events and merch. If you sign up for any amount on our Patreon, you'll be able to watch our video recordings of our podcast from season 4 onwards, with all the raw bits. That usually means more swearing. Thanks for listening.